Welcome to the Published Author Podcast, where we help entrepreneurs learn how to write a book and leverage it to grow their business and make an impact. I'm your host, Josh Steimle. Today, our guest is Tyler Wagner. Tyler is an author, speaker, entrepreneur, investor, and the founder of Authors Unite, which helps you become a profitable author and maximize your impact. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pumped to be here. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Where did you come from? And what do you do?
Yeah, so a small town an hour north of Philadelphia is where I grew up. And basically how I got to where I am today is I went to college at the University of South Carolina, and I read a book called The 4-Hour Workweek, which just changed my entire mindset. I know that that's happened for a lot of people that have read
that book. Has changed the lives of a lot of us.
Yes. Yeah. And then what happened after I read it, I actually decided to drop out of school. There were some other reasons as well. Another reason that might be of interest is that my major was entrepreneurship. And I asked my professor, like, just out of curiosity, I wasn't being like a wise guy or anything. I was just like, can you share some of the businesses that you had run? And he literally said that he had never run a business, but his major was also entrepreneurship. I was like, this is a vicious cycle. So either way, I decided to leave. And then I wanted to do public speaking. I love interacting with people. I have a podcast as well. And what I came to realize from a bunch of my mentors was that if you want to become a paid public speaker, one of the ways to do that is to first write a book and become an author. And better yet, a best-selling author. So, I'm 20, just dropped out, 80 grand in debt. And I'm like, why would anybody pay me to speak on they should probably pay me to like not speak on their stage. So I wrote the book, and then, I wake up to hitting Amazon bestseller. This was 9 years ago now. And it just completely changed my life at that time because, being from a small town, when you drop out of college, a bunch of people, it's one of those towns where everybody kind of talks to everybody. So people thought I was going down this bad path. And then they wake up like 4 to 6 months later in that range, and they're like, he's a best-selling author now. Like, this makes no sense.
And what was that first book? What was it about?
Yeah, it was called Conference Crushing. So how it came to be actually is when I dropped out, the way I decided to learn is I would just go to all these conferences. And I read books as well, but I was like, okay, if I'm not going to learn in a college setting, then I need to figure out another way. And actually even deeper into that, what it was is I would reach out to conference coordinators and I would ask them basically if I could help with anything in exchange for letting me come for free because I had no money. And surprisingly, the first one that I asked said yes. And then I just went just completely all in on it because the first one, Tim Ferriss, was the keynote speaker.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. It was called Mastermind Talks. A guy named Jason Gaynard, he puts it on. And I reached out. He said yes. And next thing I know, I'm backstage with Tim Ferriss. So I was like, all right, first one, that works. I'll keep doing that. But what happened though, that what took off quicker than my public speaking, hence how we got to where we are now, is people started reaching out to me, asking me how I did what I did with the writing of the book, publishing, and the bestseller. So what I did is I just tried it with a few of my friends to see if they would get the same results because I didn't know about the whole Amazon algorithm right away, obviously. And it worked for them. And then I was like, okay, I think I'm on to something here. Like I'm able to help people through the whole process. And now 9 years later, worked with over 1,500 authors, and I run Authors Unite now. So that's the story. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So tell us about Authors Unite then. I mean, you gave us the background story then a bit, but what exactly do you do with Authors Unite to help authors?
Yeah, so we are two things. We're a complete done-for-you system, essentially. So we're a service publisher. So if somebody wants to publish with us, we just charge up front, and then they keep all the royalties and the rights. So pretty much the opposite of a traditional publisher. And then what we've really mastered, though, is the marketing. And that's where most of our business comes from. So we help people hit the list of Amazon, BN, USA Today, Wall Street Journal. And we're actually working on a few New York Times right now. I'll keep you posted on that. And yeah, it just seems in the industry, Amazon, a lot of people do, but the USA Today, Wall Street, not a lot. So a lot of our business comes from that. And then lastly is helping authors actually like grow a business on the back end. So we have a team that builds sales funnels, does the advertising. So pretty much, from book idea all the way to like successful online business from start to finish.
So, of course, what everybody listening to this wants to know is, how do you actually do this? How do you get people onto the Wall Street Journal, hopefully New York Times in the future? How do you get them onto these lists? How do you get that marketing done?
Yeah, for sure. So Wall Street, USA Today, BN, and Amazon, they're all based on sales alone. NYT, there's a lot of other variables. I can get into some of them. But basically, Amazon's like an hourly algorithm. So, if you want to get Amazon bestseller, the right category, bunch of sales in one day, you got it. BN is more about hitting like top 10 in their entire store. And it's similar algorithm though. You want all the sales to really hit one day. USA Today and Wall Street are weekly lists. So that happens from Sunday to Saturday. And for Wall Street, you want like diversification of sales. So like you don't want just all your sales to come from Amazon. You want like, depending on competitiveness of the week, let's say 7,000 sales on Amazon, 1,000 on Barnes and Noble, and then a couple in some other stores like Kobo or something. And how we do it is, this is actually kind of cool how this all came to be is, all the ebook sites, like, I don't know, to name one, like BookBub is one. And there's like thousands of them, honestly. What I did is in the beginning, when I figured out the Amazon bestseller, I basically wasted a bunch of money and tested like all these sites out to see which ones would get me results. And then after years of doing that, it came to my realization that like 12 to 15 of them, depending on genre, would consistently get me results, anywhere from like a couple hundred sales to like over 1,000 sales. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. And then I figured out how the major lists work, Wall Street and USA Today. And then I was like, I think if I can bring them all under my roof and we focus on one book in a week, then we can hit it. So I think we did our first one like 5 years ago, and it hit number 8, Wall Street Journal. And it actually missed USA Today, the first one that we did. And then since then, we've done over 150 of them and we haven't missed. So it's pretty crazy. And it just came from testing. And then we do some other advertising, but the real meat of it is the email list.
So you've got the formula figured out, it sounds like.
Yeah, for those. And I can talk about I have some partners that I work with now on NYTs that have had success with NYT, but I've kind of just been behind the scenes on it. So I can't say like, I can't say I know everything about NYT. It's trickier.
Mm-hmm. So now, this isn't necessarily that's something that any author can just go and do. And everybody listening to this, of course, says, oh, I want that. And if I can just plunk down some bills and I can get that and buy it, that would be awesome. But you've got to have a good book to start with. How do you screen out people who are able to get onto these lists and take advantage of your services versus the people that you look at and you're like, you know what? We'd love to help you, but there's no way we can do it with this book that you've brought to us.
Yeah, so it's interesting. There's a couple different answers there. So for NYT, the screening process is way more, right? Because for instance, like if you don't have a traditional publisher, your chances are almost zero. So that's like the first question that we'll ask, which we are not, right? So if they publish under us, we probably can't get them on NYT. For Wall Street, USA Today, and the other two, because they're solely based on sales, and this is just me being completely honest with your audience, even if the book isn't good, we can still get you there. Just the truth. So as far the way that we do this is if somebody wants to publish under us and we're doing a campaign, obviously we're screening that book like very much so. Our editing team goes through it because our brand is on it. But a lot of the business we get is actually from partnering with publishers, and they'll refer the author to us, and then we just handle the marketing side. So in that case, really the screening process is kind of just making sure like the cover's good. There's no like curse words on there, and kind of things like that. But the actual interior of the book, it almost is irrelevant, which is sad to hear, but it is the truth. But what is relevant is like, what I tell people all the time is what we'll either do is we'll help your book dramatically grow into the future, or if your book is not good, then we can kill it really fast.
Yeah. So for these different publications, Wall Street Journal, USA Today, how many sales do you have to get to have a shot at getting on there? And is it relative to what everybody else is doing?
It is relative. So it completely depends on the competition for that week. But what I can tell you is the summer months seem to be the less competitive. We've gotten people, an example of last summer, we did a book called the Bezos Letters, and we got that #2 Wall Street. And I think in total it sold 6,500 around in 1 week. Whereas we got one person number 1 Wall Street, and that was in mid-January, and that one had to get over 10,000 sales. So January is obviously when all like the big kind of business self-help books are coming out. So depending on your goal, if you want to be next to the biggest, January is your best bet. But if you're trying to get the highest on the list with the least amount of sales, then summer is best to release.
And so in the summertime, about how many sales do you have to have? How many do you have to have just to get on the list so you can say, hey, we're a Wall Street Journal bestseller?
Yeah, I'd say minimum I'd like to have 5,000 just to feel like safe. Because when we do the campaigns, right, like we're actually guaranteeing, or it's, not a good situation. So we always like really go all out to make sure it definitely clears. But I think 5,000, like our first one that we did years ago had 4,800 sales and it hit #8. So I would imagine maybe #10 had 4,500 sales around there.
And so what are some of the things that you're doing to get those sales? I mean, you said funnels and things, but can you get a little bit more specific and technical about exactly what you do?
So actually for the sales, we don't use any like funnels for the book sales. That's just for like a back end thing if they hire us to handle that. For the USA Today Wall Street, and then I'll go into NYT a little bit because that's where funnels are actually involved. For USA Today Wall Street, we discount the ebook to 99 cents for 1 week. And then I pay all my email list partners to only promote that book for that week. And then they'll blast it out to all their lists. We do some Facebook retargeting ads too. So it is kind of like scarcity, right? So it's like it's only discounted for this week. Anybody who clicks in the email, it's a lander page with the Amazon link, BN link, and Kobo link. So if they go to the page, they get pixeled and then retargeted for that week. And then we'll also do some Kindle and Nook advertisements if necessary. And like all that comes together. And essentially, typically our clients now are getting at least 7,000 sales. But yeah, that's really how it works for those lists.
Cool.
Yeah.
And anybody can come to you, right? Whether they're self-published, traditionally published, they can come and say, I want to do that marketing push. I want to get on these bestseller lists, and you can work with them.
Yeah, for those first 4. Yeah. NYT, totally different, but yeah.
Yeah. So what does your ideal customer author look like? What's the type of author that comes to you and you say, wow, this is the perfect fit. This is exactly the type of author we want to be working with?
Yeah, it's probably your audience, honestly, based on what you said earlier on. But it seems to me we get 2 types of people, maybe 3. So one, and again, I'm just always shooting you guys straight. One is just straight up ego, right? Like they don't care at all. And they're just like, I just want to tell people I'm a Wall Street. So I always set the expectations like you got to think about just logically, right? So if we get you 7,099 cent sales, and you paid us 50 grand to run the campaign, you're not making much money off that direct sales. Now, how you leverage the accolade later for PR, speaking, and other things, we have seen people make like multiple on their money, but it's not just from the 99 cent sales. So it's that. Another is like very just impact driven. They could care less really about the money. They just really believe that this book is, their book. So they're willing to really invest in getting it into as many hands as possible. And then the last one is, the straight up, like, I guess more like business analytical. And they're just like, okay, let's crunch the numbers. How many speaking gigs do I need to get? How many coaching clients do I need to get for this to be worth it? So those are the three types. Sometimes they come in combinations, but that's, and they would be speakers, coaches, consultants, entrepreneurs, people like that, mostly nonfiction.
And you threw out 50 grand. Is that what you're charging, or do you have different packages, different levels?
Different levels. So our USA Today Wall Street campaign is 50 grand. That's what we charge. Our Amazon launch is 7,500. And then our BN and Amazon launch is 15 grand. And then, we have like typical sales that happen during those launches as well.
Cool. So now you're helping people with more of the writing process as well, too. I mean, we've been talking marketing here, but about all the stuff that comes before that. If somebody comes to you and they say, I've just got an idea, what's your process? How do you work with them from that stage?
So what's funny is I started out with like coaching and consulting, and then I quickly realized that at least in the model I had built, I hit a ceiling pretty quickly, just because the support necessary, I think the most I handled at one time was like 20 clients. And then I just was like, okay, I'm burnt out. This is crazy. So we are done for you or courses. So we don't actually offer like writing assistance, I'd say. It's more like we have a couple courses that can help you with the writing without our help involved, or we do ghostwriting or editing, so if you come to us with a rough draft, we can handle it, or just an idea, I would connect you with one of my ghostwriters.
Perfect. So I want to go back a little bit to more of your personal experience, because you've written a bunch of books, and some of these, I'm guessing, might have been tests for your own service to kind of figure things out. I saw that you have some ebooks that are ebooks only in your quiver and such, but tell us a little bit more about your own author experience after that first book that you already told us about.
Yeah. So, everything, in my opinion, everything gets easier after the first book, because, the first book is when you have all, just like, at least for me, the doubts, the limiting beliefs, like, are people going to hate this? And I don't know. That was the experience I had. It was rough writing that first book, but once you do it and you realize, like, nobody's really making fun of you online or anything like that, it got easier. So after that, like Conference Crushing, my first book, I do consider like my main book. That's the one that's done the best. And then I have those little ebooks that I put together. But then the other ones that I'm really proud of are the Better Business books. And those are compilation books. So what we did is we would have 100 authors in each one, and they each write one chapter on their top business lesson. And then we compiled it all into one book, kind of like Chicken Soup for the Soul model. And those ones have done pretty well. And just, the experience of like writing a book with 100 other people was pretty cool. So that was good. But I guess to answer your question a little differently, like, because my first book is the one I really think of as my book, the writing experience was like every morning. I could only do it an hour every morning. Some people can do it for like 12 hours in a day and they sprint. For me, it was exercise in the morning. My mind's clear then, and then I could get it done then. And then I would go into like my calls and whatever else I had to do that day, but I could never do the writing at night. And another thing that I came to realize was that it's not about perfecting the process. It's about completing the process. And what I mean by that is you have to like allow your rough draft to just be like as terrible as it wants to be. I know I'll speak for myself. Mine was terrible. And then I hired a very good editor. And it's cool if you know this going in, that an editor can really take your book from like a 2 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10. That was the experience I had and a lot of my clients. So as long as you can just get it out of your mind, it can be sloppy, read it out loud, fix it up a little, then give it to an editor and just let it be what it's meant to be. So that's my experience.
Cool. Yeah, it's interesting you talking about the brain power, how it fades throughout the day. I've had the same experience myself. In the mornings, it's easy for me to churn out a bunch of content. But as the day goes on, especially once I hit 4 or 5 p.m., it's like I'm at like 10% capacity. I'll sit there and it's just so hard to get that material out. Whereas in the morning, it's just so much easier for me. I know everybody's different. some people are night owls. That's when their best work is done. Other people, it's morning. But for
Yeah,
sure, everybody says that they do run out of steam eventually, and you've got to recharge those batteries.
definitely. Yeah, I'm a morning person. I get up at like 4 a.m. sometimes, and that's when I can focus. Typically, though, like 5, but the night owls, I cannot relate to that, man. Not at all. So yeah, we're all different.
So can you take us through some of the success stories that you've had? Do you have any case studies that you can tell us about specific
Yeah.
authors? And for our audience, perhaps entrepreneurs and how they've gotten a book launched through you, done the marketing, how it's helped them grow their business?
Yeah, for sure. So there's I think we feature like 25 Wall Streets on our site. So I'll pick a couple that are coming to mind. One that we did that was referred to us from Scribe Media. If you're familiar with Scribe Media, we did probably 3 months ago. I think it was August, this last August. It's called "Weightlifting is a Waste of Time," and the author's Dr. John Jaquish. So we did his book and got it to number 2 Wall Street. And just to be clear, I don't take credit for like his success after that. This guy is actually very successful before he even got to us. But we got him to number 2, and we built him a nice foundation to then really scale it from there. And his book has just been crushing it. Like, it almost has 1,000 reviews in like 3 months, which, how hard Amazon reviews are.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So it's been number 1 in like all of its categories on Amazon the entire time, which, to just have a pop-up for a day is pretty easy, but to keep it up there for that long is pretty hard. And he actually hit Wall Street for 2 weeks in a row. So, that's a pretty cool success story. And he sells this thing called an X3 bar. It's like a workout thing. And then he has like, I think like protein powder supplements, and the book, leads into that business. So I don't know the numbers, but I can say, I think it's going very well is what I'll say, Another one actually that we just did last week. We did this one for Ben Bella Books is the publisher, and her name's Grace Smith, and she wrote a book called Close Your Eyes, Lose Weight. So she's she does hypnosis for people and helps them lose weight. And I think she does hypnosis in other ways as well. That one hit number 2 Wall Street. That was pretty cool. It was like Obama's memoir is number 1, and then ours was number 2. So she was very happy. She sent back and she was like, if there's anybody that I'd want to be number 2 next to, it'd be Obama. So I was like, all right, that's cool. That's one. And trying to think, I'm trying to think in my mind, because some of these, the publishers like white label us, so I can't actually say who they are.
Yeah. But see, this is interesting, the case studies you're sharing, because what you're pointing out, which you said earlier, is that the investment in your service, you're not going to make that back on the book sales. I mean, you sell 7,000 books at $1 a piece. Amazon's taking their chunk. Obviously, you're not making 50 grand off of that. But if you have a health bar, or you have a service or some product that you're selling through that book, then it doesn't take that many sales of that other product to then get the ROI on your service.
Yeah, and actually, one of the best examples, and they have, and when I say lower ticket items that they're selling, right? Like I think his exercise equipment's like $500, and then she has like an app that's a monthly subscription. So their back end stuff was lower ticket, but I believe it's still worked out from an ROI perspective. One that we did, his name's Dan Henry, and we did that one as well a few months ago. And for him, the decision was like pretty easy, because he's got a program that the book leads directly into. And I think the program's actually higher now, but when we work together, it's $10,000. I think it's called Sold Out Courses. And then he has a mastermind. It all builds from there. So in his mind, he basically was like, if I can sell 5 courses, from this investment, then I already made my money back. And you're telling me that I'm probably going to get at least 7,000 sales. Obviously, not every sale reads the entire book, but let's just even say it's like 20%. I don't know. It's still over 1,000 people reading the book. Mm-hmm. And if 5 of them become a client, then we're good. So for people that have a good back end in place, I think it's a pretty easy decision from that front.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So Now, do you only work with the authors of a book that's recently been published, or can somebody come to you with a book that was published 3 years ago, and would you be able to work with them still?
We can still do that. It's really strange. The one that we got number one was actually, and that was I can't remember. It was in January. I think it was early. It was this January. That one was published 2016, I believe. So that was like 4 years ago. So we can work no matter when it's published. I think it's kind of cooler to do when it releases. But yeah, we can do that.
Mm-hmm. So you brought up Scribe Media. So for those who don't know, Scribe helps people get books written, just like Published Author does, just like you do, kind of like we're all kind of overlapping here. So what is it that you bring to the table that Scribe doesn't provide through their own marketing programs that they would refer somebody to you?
I think from, the experience thus far, I think it's mostly the major list bestsellers. So the Wall Street, they do provide some marketing stuff, and I think they're still building it out. But for Wall Street, USA Today, I don't believe they're providing that. So that's really the only thing that they're referring over to us.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So for the authors that are looking at your service, how can they get the most out of it? What can they be doing now with their book beyond just saying, well, write a great book that has a great title and a great cover? Of course, yeah. But what can authors specifically be doing so that when they come to you, they're really ready for it and they're set up for success?
So there's two things there. One is, obviously, if you don't really want to put any time into the marketing, then you obviously can just pay us and we just handle it all for you. But I would suggest a hybrid because I think there's low-hanging fruit there. Meaning, one thing I would do is, the marketing really starts before the writing, and that's where I see a lot of first-time authors mess that up, and rightly so, because the writing of the book is just so intense already. So it's like, let me just focus on that, and then I'll figure out the marketing later. And I learned this from Gary Vee. He says, document over create. And I don't think it should be necessarily over. It's one or the other, or both. Both are fine. But as you're writing the book, creating the book, documenting that process publicly is a great marketing tool. And for me, that it was pretty profound because I always thought about marketing pieces as having to be profound, like a lot of effort put into it. But if you just document the journey of writing and publishing your book, a lot of people will follow just for that alone. And it doesn't take much time to just take a selfie in the morning and be like, on page 17 and still struggling, something like that. And like just showing those raw emotions of it. And then what you can do is like have a Facebook group that you invite people to join. And then that becomes kind of your launch group. And they basically are with you the entire time, do things like a book cover vote. I'm sure a lot of your audience has seen stuff like that. And it just comes to be, I've had people that have started that in the beginning, and 6 months later, they have thousands of people in a Facebook group. And that becomes your launch group. Didn't cost them any money, some time. So you do that. And then I'd say having that back end solidified and ideally tested, right? So like, if you know of Dan Henry, he's obviously done very well with sales funnels. So, his back end was definitely tested before, the book, before we did our whole launch. So if you can have that dialed in and know what your conversion rates are and everything, then you'll know from the sales and eyeballs that we get you kind of what the monetary outcome will be. So I'd say those two things.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the common regrets? You kind of alluded to some there, but what are some of the other regrets that authors come up with after your program where they say, oh, this program was so great, but if I had known what I was doing, I would have done this other stuff too at the same time? I mean, they're starting the group, there's building that audience. Are there other things that authors could be doing now before they work with you or in alignment with the work that they do with you?
Yes, the back end thing is probably the biggest. And really, so there's two things there. The back end thing is the biggest, but what happens is because they don't plan far ahead enough, they don't have that time to test it, and they've already had it in their mind and have normally already told a lot of people when it's going to launch. So they don't want to like push the launch out 6 months. So that, and then there's a decision to be had of like, do I want to wait 6 months to get my back end right? Or do I just want to launch? And most people choose to get it out right away because it's been a year of their life. So they want to get it out. So I'd say that. And then secondly is PR, right? So like the best thing, what I tell authors you can do, like as soon as we do a huge launch for you and you hit one of these major lists, leveraging the accolade for like interviews, podcasts, TV, blogs, whatever it might be, have a good PR agency or person in place to really ride that wave with you, right after. So.
Mm-hmm. Having worked with so many authors, published, self-published, do you see any difference from your standpoint with the authors that go through a traditional publisher versus self-publishing in terms of the success that they have with your program?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I'd have to add in there like hybrid publishers. So like Morgan James is somebody we work with a lot as well. That's who published the Bezos Letters. And like, Morgan James is a hybrid publisher, but like their whole system is incredible. Like I just think the way that they have everything set up and the success that they get for their authors is amazing. So I don't really think one type of publisher is better than the other. I think actually what it comes down to is like what the author's goals are and really what the author kind of brings to it as well. Right. So I traditional to me is like, if you already have a huge audience and you want to try to go traditional and just have them take care of everything for you and maybe get an advance, which is advances are seen less and less, as time goes on. Then I say go for it. But the stories that I've heard of people that don't have that big audience to begin with, and then they try to get a traditional, it takes them like a year to just get a no, and like, I don't know. So to me, it's not worth it then. So yeah, I feel like it depends on the author, honestly. It's hard to say because I've had really good success with hybrids, really good success with traditionals, and really good success with self-published. The only thing I'll say is when we do self-publish and we do and this will be cool for your audience. A lot of people don't know about this. There's a website called My Identifiers, which you obviously probably know about, and you can set up your own publishing company there, right? So I always recommend doing that. And maybe I'm a little nitpicky with it, but I just don't think that the people that are in the know when it says independently published, it's sometimes like frowned upon. So a quick way to get around that is just set up your own publishing company, buy your own ISBN for $125. And then on all the sites, it'll say your publishing company. I don't know. I think that's better. So.
Yeah, I learned about this so my first book was traditionally published. My next book, I went to self-publish it through Ingram Spark, and it said, do you have an imprint? And I thought, well, no, but what's keeping me from setting one up? I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I've started businesses. Like, why not start my own imprint? And then I looked into it and I realized this is super easy. I mean, it's basically coming up with a name, a logo, and a little bit of, starting a business sort of, but then you've got your own imprint. And people in the know in the publishing industry, I mean, they might look at an imprint and be like, what's this imprint? I've never heard of this before. But everybody else, nobody else is going to have a clue because there are a lot of imprints that are under Penguin or Simon & Schuster that I've never heard of. And I'm in this industry. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's one of those things that's like, it's kind of funny because if you think about just like, is it like the question, is it hard to start a publishing company? The answer that most people would think is yes. But yes, to like be able to do all the back end stuff, that does take a while to learn all that. But to just set it up like that is actually, you could do it in like an hour.
That's about what it took me.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it was literally, I was on Ingram Spark and it said, what's your imprint? And I was like, maybe I'll look into starting one. And then like an hour later, I'm setting up my imprint in Ingram Spark and saying, okay, here's my imprint. Here's my logo. Here's my name, everything there. It was that easy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love to hear that. That's awesome.
So thank you so much for spending time with us here today, Tyler. Are there any other things, because you do a service that I'm not super familiar with, are there any other questions I should be asking that I haven't asked yet?
No, I mean, I'd say like, a lot of people want to write a book. And I think, and I kind of talked about this a little earlier, but I think one of the biggest things that holds authors back is that they're trying to write that first draft and make it perfect. And it's just never going to be that way. So I think if anything comes from this, I would just hope that more people that want to write books, they just let go of that perfection and just allow that first draft to be awful. And then just like let it grow from there, and then go through the process. And if you decide to do it on your own, great. And if you decide to hire somebody like yourself or me, that's great too. But yeah, I would just say do it, because it's one of those things that people put off forever. And then I think they regret how long they ended up putting it off for.
Perfect. Great advice. So of course you're at authorsunite.com. Is there anywhere else online that people can find you, track you down?
You can do Instagram, Tyler B. Wagner.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for being with us here today, Tyler, and telling us more about your service and what you do for authors.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to spread the word, please give us a 5-star rating review and tell your friends to subscribe too. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you listen to podcasts. And if you're an entrepreneur interested in writing and publishing a nonfiction book to grow your business and make an impact, visit publishedauthor.com for show notes for this podcast and other free resources.